Hello, hello, world, anyone watching. My name is Steven Satterfield. I'm the founder of Whetstone Media. I'm pleased to be here this evening on behalf of New Avenues for Youth with the Black Brewers, a cohort of Black brewers from around the US. I'm going to jump right in because I want to make sure we have space and time for everyone's voice this evening. I think the best way to set the stage for the conversation is just to very quickly have everyone go around and introduce yourselves, who you are, where you are, what you do, what you brew. And once we have that foundation, I'm going to just jump right into to the conversation. So, Arthur, why don't I start with you? I'm just going to move through the grid here in order.
Sure. So my name's Arthur Moy. I'm the CEO and majority owner of Full Circle Brewing Company. We are out of Fresno, California. Full Circle has been around for about 21 years, and I purchased it 5 years ago after running my own CPA practice for about just as many years, about 5-6 years. And we brew all kinds of beers. We try and be experimental and cutting edge, but our staples are juicy New England IPA. We have a Illa Vanilla Milkshake series, and we have a Hip Hop Puree Pie of the Tiger series, kind of a tart sour beer category. That's what we're known for, and putting on a lot of entertainment. You can find our beers all over the state and about 6 other states.
Okay. Appreciate you, Arthur. Raj, why don't we go with you? Raj from Oak Park.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Raj, Oak Park Brewing Company. My position at the brewery, I'm a lead brewer, along with my good buddy Jeff. So as far as the beers that we brew across the board. As far as our movement, we're all about the ABCs, art, beer, and community. That's keeping it straight to the point, man.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Raj. William, I know you're in traffic battling 75, 85 in Atlanta, possibly trying to go north. So we'll give you a pass, but if you're able, maybe just give us a quick hello and let us know about you and what you do, what you brew.
Hey, y'all. Sorry that you can't see me moving or anything like that.
You're not moving.
William Teasley. I'm the COO of Conso Brewing in Atlanta, Georgia. We are in the process of securing our location. So there's been a lot of moving parts going on with that, but we've been home brewing for about a decade, and we've actually had beer in the market over the last 3-4 years. I've met a lot of these guys at the original Fresh Fest, some other things over the years, and this is a great group of people. Shannon and I catch up whenever he's in Atlanta. Our name comes from an ancient Egyptian brewer whose name was Khonso Imheb. And they discovered his tomb a couple of years back, and he was the brewer to the gods of the dead and for Pharaoh's court. We also learned that he was in charge of granaries and stuff like that. So we decided to use that as our brand name before White Boys took it, and then we would have had to, they could have co-opted something that really connects beer to the African diaspora, the African continent. And we wanted to be sure we one of us owned that. And we brew a variety of things over the years, and we're really just kind of focused over the last couple of years. I know Teo's similarly focused in getting our spot and getting open.
Thank you, William. I want to talk about that, getting open. Marcus, big homie, organizer. Why don't you introduce yourself?
How's everybody doing this evening? Thank you guys for joining today. Name is Marcus Baskerville, head brewer, co-owner of Weather Souls Brewing Company. We'll actually be celebrating our 5-year anniversary in about 2 weeks. So we're in San Antonio, Texas. As far as our beer, we're kind of across the board. Obviously, we're more known for the stouts that we kind of push out, but we're also the creators of Black is Beautiful, which was a huge international initiative that took place last year. Raised over a little bit over $4 million in support of social justice reform. So we're very proud about that. And yeah, one of the organizers, collaborators for this year for Brews from the Avenues.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Marcus. T.O., Crown and Hops.
What's cracking, Steven? It's been a while since Apex, North Carolina, Gabrielle's table.
True indeed.
T.O. Hunter, COO, head of brewing operations for Crowns and Hops Brewing Company, Inglewood, California. Our emphasis on life and on our brewing company is to preserve culture, to expand palates psychologically and physically, and to build community. We're about to open up our flagship brewing company third quarter of next year. Really excited about that. 14,400 square feet of a brew pub that'll be located right off of Crenshaw Boulevard, the areas where they don't develop first. So we're excited to bring a new concept to the city that is family friendly. Our focus as a company is from a movement standpoint, started off with diversity and inclusion, but ultimately once we started to really understand the language around racial equity, we realized that inherently was how you show proof of systemic racism being dismantled and destroyed. So our focus is on racial equity. We even have a beer to talk about some of the brews that we the beers that we brew. 8 Trill Pills, which is our beer focused on racial equity. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation cited by 2050, if we focus on racial equity now, we stand to see an impact of $8 trillion, hence the name 8 Trill. And our flagship is BPLB. We lean into our culture, and BPLB stands for Black People Love Beer, Brown People Love Beer. You will never catch us, not leaning into our culture, because we feel like it has been far too long for us to lean into our culture in this industry. So we are relying on all the energy and power of our ancestors to do it. And you'll recognize Crowns and Hops when you see us. That's for sure. By the way, shout out to my business partner, Benny Ashburn, who could not be here, but she is the second half of Crowns and Hops.
Okay, bet. And yes, good to see you again, bro. Okay, George from Assembly, George Johnson.
Hello, I'm George from Assembly Brewing here in Portland, Oregon. We started March of 2019. We focused on balanced, easy drinking ales. We didn't, unfortunately, didn't get we got a lot of traction when we started, but, shut down before our first anniversary. So can't wait to jump back into it full swing. And I'm the owner, head brewer.
Appreciate you, bro. Okay, Kumba Smith. I get that right?
Yeah, man. So Kumba Smith, owner of Smedox Brewing. Gonna be the director of brewing operations once we get up and rolling. Like some brothers in the group, looking for a spot right now. So that's been the fun part, quote unquote. Trying to convince somebody to let us come into this spot and brew. That's been it's been a wild ride here in Dallas, man. Not getting a lot of love, so but we got to push on, man. So really, I've been brewing, home brewing since, like 2013. I had some beers out on the market, worked with a lot of local breweries here to kind of push the brand a little bit. So we've got a pretty good backing here in Dallas. A lot of people want to see us open. A lot of people want to see us really, really do this thing. So gonna keep pushing, just like to brew all styles, basically, everything from stouts to porters to lagers to sours. So just really trying to be, I don't really want to focus on one style. I want to brew all styles well. So hopefully, once we get some more money, lock in a spot, we'll be able to start doing our build out maybe sometime next year, early 2023. So
Riding with you. Looking forward to it.
appreciate it.
And Shannon, I believe, last but not least.
Saving the best for last, huh? No, I'm just joking. Hey, my name is Shannon Harris. I am owner, brewer director, brewer of Urban Jungle Brewing. We're going to be based here in Austin, Texas. Just like a few other brothers mentioned, we do not have a location at this particular moment, but we are aiming to get a location launched hopefully in Q4 of 2022, if not early 2023. I've been brewing, man, for a few years, probably about 6-7 years, on and off as a home brewer and also a gypsy brewer. Had brew collabs across the country and internationally that released. Styles that we focus on, or that we will be focusing on at the Urban Jungle Brewing, is mostly pastry inspired stouts and sours. But we're also going to stick to traditional beers like lagers, koshes, and also hazy IPAs and West Coast IPAs. But it's a pleasure to see everybody here congregating, connecting for a special event just like this. And I look forward to hopefully meeting those that I haven't met in person someday. But yeah, salute and cheers to everybody out there.
Salute and cheers. Okay, so we got like half hour or so for the actual conversation. I just want to go head first because I think this, even though obviously this is virtual, we are convened here. And so where there are Black folks convene, that's a lot of power. So let's tap in. A number of you all mentioned that at the stage of your development, that you are looking for either financial support or looking for physical space. So I want to begin the conversation there, as this is such a big part of the Black entrepreneurial experience, not just in brewing, but even outside, and talk more about specifically what that struggle has been like to try and make a space and find a space within this industry that you all have already dedicated yourselves to. So anyone that applies to can just go in there and talk about that struggle.
I can jump in with a little bit of a struggle. So for my path, trying to be financially stable to open a brewery, we were able to start a crowdfunding program through Kickstarter that was pretty successful. Raised a little bit of capital there, met our goal and actually exceeded it just a little bit. That kind of opened up some doors and, got eyes open to people that were not of color, to be like, oh, there's something happening here, and now I want to try to get vested in it, to the opportunity to where we actually had a location for our brewery about 2 months ago. And unfortunately, that was purchased from under us by a bigger conglomerate in the city of Austin, who also has a little bit of a background of racial profiling against minority business owners. And I think that the news actually made it up to the ladder where he was at, and he just completely purchased the property from under me, which is unfortunate. But I took that as a blessing that maybe that wasn't going to be the right location, so that would put me back in the market. But it's really tough, and I guess it depends on your demographic or where you're located. You would think Austin, Texas is well versed and diverse, and we're just young millennials that's here and all of that. But unfortunately, we got a lot of backlash and hate for trying to be the first Black-owned brewery in Austin, Texas. Whether it's comments in articles that's being written, or random emails that come out of the blue from people that don't want to see it happen, to where that location that I was speaking of, or where we were going to be, we had to actually get a census from the community because the location wasn't zoned to be a brewery. And we did get a lot of votes for it to become a brewery, but there was a lot of feedback from the community of where we were going to be located, that they just didn't want to see that type of business, quote unquote, in the area. Although there is another brewery that's like right around the way that is actually white owned, and there was no problem for that. But there's a lot of backlash about us coming out. So I don't know everybody else's story, but I mean, it's all about just trying to keep your head up, keep grinding, and just trying to figure out, who we can really get that help from. I know that a lot of people think, you just want to run a business and you want to get it off the ground yourself. And I'm open and I know that I need the help. I've always been on the brewing side of craft beer, never been on the business owner side. So I'm sure there's a million and one things that I don't even know yet or haven't even foresee that's going to come in the future. So that's just a little obstacle and something that, I'm trying to stay positive about, but just trying to look into more investment opportunities before heading over to a bank to try to start a loan. You get a loan with a bank, they going to want their money first. So if you go there with an investor, more than likely a bank is going to tell you no. So that's just something that I'm working on myself with Urban Jungle Brewing.
I hear that. And Tio, like you've been able to, secure this spot off Crenshaw, like you said, 14,000 square feet. That's not small. So how were you able to break through? What kind of wisdom or game can you impart on our colleagues here to about your process?
Oh, I'm sure as all owners of breweries understand, the location thing is not something that happens overnight. We've been looking for a property for over 2 years, and it took us that long to establish and to find something. And I'll be honest with you, every brewery owner that Benny and I met around the world said one thing: invest in space, because you will never be able to get it again at the cost that you're getting it at today. Everything that Shannon brought up in terms of obstacles, 100% are there. I would argue that capital is king, and we are in a very capital intensive industry. That's why myself, even Arthur, have taken to other ways to generate capital. We just launched on Start Engine, which is an equity crowdfunding platform that allows us to literally set our valuation and raise capital with our community. This is something that is not foreign overseas. Rather, it's extremely common for the community to be able to invest. And I bring that up to just make the point. This is 2021. We don't have to just depend on banks anymore. We just don't have to depend on predatory investors that want to come in and get their pound of flesh before we're even able to establish ourselves as being profitable. We have to be far more innovative, which is why we even came up with the 8 Trill Pills initiative in general. When the pandemic hit and we were applying for all of these grants and all of these ways of getting capital to get our goals accomplished, we were disqualified because of being either alcohol and or not having the financials to show in order to qualify for it. So we literally created a foundation that generated 100,000 in this year one and gave it away literally for no equity, for nothing, because we have to start to put a dent in this less than 1% Black owned breweries in this country. And it's not going to come through a traditional path of brewery ownership. And I'll pass the mic to someone else. Arthur, drop some game on him, man.
We need your audio, bro. Arthur.
All right, there we go. I would say, securing a space, I guess to touch on that first, you kind of, I think what we've been able to do is kind of get our ears into the community, the city, and understanding what buildings the city owns, what kind of incentives the city has, and taking a look at those ownership roles to see who owns what. That's been we've been able to get ahead of it, because all those spaces that everybody wants, we're not the only breweries looking for it. So getting your ear on the train track before it gets listed is the best. So just being in the know and in cahoots, with the real estate agents that represent the areas you want to go. I think, most importantly, finding ownership that you jive with, because it is important. We had a location that was owned by an attorney A real estate attorney, I would not recommend that, because it's not easy to get out because the attorney will just sue you, But writing leases and doing your TIs in a way that makes that space more acceptable to the next person, if anything were to go awry, kind of does reduce the risk that the ownership feels. So if you're going to turn the space into a brewery in the brewery district, and that could eventually be turned around into another brewery in the brewery district, the ownership is a lot more lenient to put in those TIs and sign that shorter lease. So, and try not to get had for 10 years.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to William. William, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah. And sort of to build on the excellent points the gentlemen have made, there was no one that really was there to walk a lot of us through the process. And there's also a lot of frustration when you see others just sort of find a spot, roll in, and they're open. And you didn't even know they were in the queue, in the queue just to even open a brewery. I know in Georgia, it's at least every other month there's someone new popping open. You're like, where'd these guys come from? How'd they get the capital? How'd they, there is a level of having access to resources, and it's not necessarily capital. Capital is very important, but it's being able to have people who will either move those needles forward with you or guide you through some of the landmines that are out there. I mean, Art hit it on the head, man, because we got our broker actually represents the owner of the property we're looking to lease in. And so magically through the process, we ended up at that site. And so
very similar story with us.
Well, yeah.
Very similar story with us. Like, we were working with the same broker for almost 2 years. So he was aligned with not only the ownership, but also availability and inventory.
Yeah. And so we end up at the site. So as we continue to negotiate, I'm like, guys, we don't have a plan B, because if we go to them, they're going to turn around and tell the owner we're sniffing around other properties. So, there was, more, I think, knowledge about these processes that would have helped us, some of us, avoid some of the things we've ended up bumping into as we do this. To Shannon's point, in where we're looking at locating, which is over in the west end of Atlanta. Teo's been over in that area, and some other folks have as well. We already reached out to the neighborhood, and the neighborhood president said, I don't really like beer and alcohol and stuff like that. And he said, but I like you guys, because we went there first because we knew we'd have to go through there. And then it's just down to capital, the SBA process. We're gearing up to raise capital, and we have to let people know who are looking at investing that, hey, if you get 20% of this pie, the SBA is going to come to you as to help secure the loan. If you want 10% of the pie, TTB is going to do a full background check. The state's going to do a full background check. We're educating our prospective owners of some of the caveats they find there. But we've had to kind of figure it out on the fly and navigate the landmines as we get close to them. We haven't had any blow us up yet, but we've been pretty close.
Yeah, that's why I'm really appreciating this conversation, because this is not a conversation that is unique to Black brewers. This is a conversation about Black folks trying to move through the world as entrepreneurs in different sectors and different industries across the United States. I own a media business. I just for the first time this year have gone out and tried to raise capital and have encountered a lot of to varying degrees, some of the challenges that y'all have outlined. So I feel that. But even in the midst of this conversation, there's a lot of information being exchanged, which is the key to everything, in my opinion. We've talked about some different funding models, whether that be through crowdfunding that also, it sounds like could take equity within the company. We've talked about SBA loans. There are different, I guess, complications or different, everyone's in a different position, right? Like depending on your own bankroll, your professional networks, perhaps collegiate or academic networks, like we all are in different spaces in our journey. So there, the power here is all of us, right? Like exchanging this knowledge and information. But what I'm curious about is on the consumer side, right? Because my background is actually as a sommelier. I came up in the wine business many years ago, almost 20 years ago. And it was an odd space for me back then. George, I was in Portland, in 2002, getting into the wine business. We probably all know about the tricky history of Portland. You mentioned some of the struggles that you had there. I'm curious, especially in a post-2020 society, what is the support? What is the marketplace? What are the customers looking like? You know what I mean? In terms of who we're selling to, who we're messaging and marketing to, because I think that has a direct tie-in to what we're talking about in terms of being able to turn that audience or customer base into potential funding for our own brick and mortar enterprises.
So I think I'm in a unique situation. I started home brewing back in 1994, and I've been running the long game of this whole thing. Started planning to open a restaurant back in the late 80s, early 90s. It's been challenging. It's taken until 2 years ago for me to accomplish that. But one thing I did is I came from a restaurant and a bar background. So I was the neighborhood bartender in the neighborhood that I opened up in. And I believe that it helped me out a lot because I knew a lot of the people that lived around there. And it was in a city with so many breweries, it was what they call the brewery desert. So when they saw that it was coming without them even knowing, some of them knew it was me, some of them didn't. But everyone was really supportive of the idea of having a brewery in the space. Took an old dilapidated building that no one wanted to see and helped out the neighborhood. So but it's I listened to some of people's problems, and I feel blessed because living in Portland's a double-edged sword, and not just because of the reasons that you talk about, Stephen, but also just having so many breweries. And on the one hand, it's harder to get into because there's so many, but on the other hand, it wasn't as hard for me to start talking to a banker years ago, but creating a relationship with a banker that had already helped out a couple breweries. And so it wasn't, they didn't feel like, I know in some places they feel like a brewery is a restaurant. And then they say, oh, well, you have this much of a % of failure. And in this town, they knew that breweries were more successful than restaurants. So I got some financial support through a community bank that maybe I wouldn't have gotten through in other cities.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like we, like Shannon was saying, being in Austin, versus, William in the West End. I'm from Atlanta, so I know that area. I'm familiar with the sort of brewing renaissance there. Sometimes the environment that we're in actually has a lot of implications on how we can move. So I want to kind of stay on this customer thing because so much of our experience in this realm has to also be about cultivating audience among our own people, right? Like I have experience and I know well that Black people are like the most loyal clientele consumers, especially for our own product. But for a product like alcohol, right, for wine and beer, where we maybe didn't grow up with craft beer, or in fact, likely didn't grow up with craft beer as part of our youth. We didn't grow up with wine, in my case, as part of our youth. So how have y'all been navigating, obviously, centering your own Black identity and mission with also trying to court our people who, at the end of the day, in my opinion, are going to be the ones who are going to help us stand tall as we go forward in this and other industries too?
I think that's kind of been an interesting balance on our end, especially here in San Antonio, where there's not a heavily Black population. Dealing with craft beer, we know that craft beer is heavily Caucasian influenced, right? So dealing with the majority of our customer base, I would say almost 95% of that is Caucasian. Dealing with the Black community as far as brewing, we've tried to do things to kind of navigate them into that realm. We look at kind of the history of dealing with minorities and craft beer, and like you were saying, wine. It's generally things that we don't gravitate towards. One, because they're more expensive. Two, they're never were marketed to Black communities at all. So when we get into this stage of, okay, we're a Black-owned brewery and we're trying to promote beer, it's like, well, at the end of the day, beer was never anything that was originally promoted to the Black community in the first place. So this is something that's completely new to them. So you do things like try to bring on marketing things like kind of what Tio's doing, where Black people love beer and different things like that, to kind of gravitate these individuals to become more into within the craft realm. But it's a hard balance between the two. For us, luckily, dealing with Black is Beautiful, that's definitely raised the awareness within the Black community. But in all honesty, it wasn't because, oh, we want to drink beer. It was because we want to support this initiative because it's an amazing thing. So it's definitely been an interesting journey trying to get more of a Black, audience within our brewery, and even a Black audience within general within craft beer. It's definitely grown within the last couple of years. You look at, especially dealing with a lot of Black-owned breweries trying to open. You got the influencer movement going, where you got a lot of Black influencers that are opening up. But then, even then, within the Black customer range, I still feel like it's a very minimal aspect of the overall people who actually drink craft beer.
I would argue that that we have always been a part of the brewing community. Out of the 118 billion, about 24 billion is craft beer, and of those 24, about a third of those are people of color. So we're there. That's why when we created the movement, Black People Love Beer, it wasn't Black People Love Beer too. We were already there. We've always been here. I just found out that my great-great-great-grandmother was a brewer from 1900 to 1930. I know Marcus also has a brewery background in his family as well.
Yeah.
So the point is, we got to start clearing up this confusion. And when I say confusion, you have to also understand the craft beer industry has been using Black and brown culture with no license for generations. They've been pimping it. They've been pimping out our culture in craft.
Talk about it. Say more about that. Get specific.
No. To everybody on here, no, I get specific as hell.
No, please do. This is you got the floor.
Yeah,
I want to know about that. What does that exploitation look like specifically in this industry?
I mean, you have
Come on, Teo, talk your talk.
Yeah, it's in two brackets.
It's been around.
So you have the big beer industry that has literally been using our monikers and our language to literally trap us in one corridor of beer, malt liquor for generations. The Commodores, Red Fox, they've
Billy D.
Williams so much that they use a caricature of him to market to us now, which is pathetic. So when you think about that side, and then you think about current independent craft beer, they get along with putting Tupac and Biggie on every damn can, using our language, using our clever wordsmith skills. When 3 years ago, Benny and I literally got a cease and desist for using the word dope because we had a brand called Dope and Dank from two white brothers out in Beverly Hills. So my point being is, this is about equity. This is about equity in the business. This is about equity in our culture. If we don't grab it and if we don't do it, people are going to disguise themselves in our culture, give themselves a pass to use our culture without us having an opportunity to get the resources, gather and compile our network so that we can execute against leveraging our own culture for once in this history, in the history of this country. It is imperative that this conversation go around equity at this point. We've always been here. We've always been involved with this product. Raj is a dynamic brewer out of Sacramento. I'd love to hear his position as he's kicking up dust up there. And it's about equity, 100%.
Copy that. I appreciate
appropriation is real.
That is deep appropriation, and it also checks out with what I'm sure we've all experienced as diners, right? We go to breweries, we go to restaurants, we hear the loud music of our culture, right? And then we don't see ourselves in the place, and so of course that as we see again across industry, Black people, whether it's our likeness, our language, our culture, is always exploited for profit. So thank you for spelling that out. Raj, we would like to hear from you actually. Let's talk about your experience in SAC, whether it be sort of on this consumer level or maybe like bigger picture, just what your experience has been from the entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, on my end, it's like you got to look at this forum right now. It's like we all have our negative experiences, but when we hold forums like this, we vibe on a different frequency. As far as like customers and dealing with customers, when they come in, they see a Black brewer, they think I'm the guy that's cleaning up everything, which I do. Which I do. But, once I have an opportunity to talk to them and they speak to me like they have some sense and, the aptitude to listen, it's all about educating, creating, and having fun. So if you get an opportunity to talk to somebody, just be straightforward with them. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, you guys, I know if you guys
are Marcus and Will need to mute.
So, you guys can get a sense of people when you first meet them, right? So if somebody's genuine or somebody's full of shit. Pardon my French, that's just how I am. I'm going to speak my truth. But if they're really genuine, you can hold a conversation with them. A lot of people don't know we were doing this in the days of old. We were doing this as slaves in the United States. So it's not like we don't know about beer. It was just one of those things to where there's black bagging going on, block busting, redlining, all of these things to keep people out. And if you want to build something, where do you go? You got to go get the N-words. You look at all these news outlets or television networks. When they start out, they get a Black audience. And after a few years, they move on to whatever the next big thing is outside of the Black culture or society or whatever you want to call it. But I think we're relevant. We got a lot of work to do. And with this panel, man, I would love to see all of us work together so we don't have to go to these banks and beg for money. If we all work together, pull our funds together, build trust funds, we can do a lot of work. We can get a lot of things done.
100, completely indeed.
And
Cool.
one of the things, Stephen, too, like I think it's important to know that we were also brewing when we weren't slaves as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a narrative that is a healthy narrative that Black and brown entrepreneurs need to understand too, is that we did that shit because we wanted to, and we still made some loot.
We was the first Brewers. That's what a lot of people don't understand.
I hear that. And also too, I'm gonna just add the Harris family, which is my OGs, my ancestors. I was also brewers, brewing actually dandelion, brewing all kind of fruits. That was my granny. So we're talking two generations. My dad grew up picking dandelion just for my granny to brew. My grandpa was a distiller, not at a distillery, but in the basement. So that has, I mean, that's not a slavery story. That's my story. That's y'all's story, Marcus. So Taylor, I feel that. Kumba, I'm curious about your experience in Dallas, a place, admittedly, I don't know that well, but I was struck, by you talking about the breadth of your brewing from porters to sours. So obviously, you're deep in your craft. And to me, that also speaks about how the game has changed too, right? How palettes have changed from 2013 to 2022, let's say. So can you help us tap in on like what your experience is like, whether that be just an aesthetic transition as a brewer, or just like how you've been trying to make that leap on this entrepreneurial level, as we've been discussing around owning space and place?
Yeah, definitely. It's weird, man, because where I live at, we have a brewery. We have one brewery. It's not that good, but and so it's some stuff happened where the owner of the brewery, killed one of his main investors, and so the brewery was open for a long time. So I've been living in this city for 10 plus years, right? And so I'm like, all right, maybe you guys want a brewery. So I called the city and was like, hey, I'm trying to get a brewery open. I've been living in Allen for 10 plus years, blah, blah, blah. You guys want a brewery? We want a brewery, but we don't know how to open a brewery. It's like, well, you already opened one. And so just trying to deal with the city, not getting any calls back from the city was kind of tough. It's like, all right, so let me try again. I wait a couple of weeks. I call back. Hey, I'm trying to get a brewery open. Can you tell me the steps? Blah, blah, blah. And not hearing anything from the city where I live at was it was kind of frustrating. So I started to look in different cities, neighboring cities, because within 5 or 10 miles from me, there's like two breweries, and those are up in the city north of us, right? So I'm like, well, if I can get anything from, let's just say, 635 is one of the major highways on 75 is the one that I live off of, and it's like, all right, within that area would be prime location. So I hired an agent. We started just calling, and everybody was like, we don't want the usage. We don't want a brewery here. We don't want a brewery. We don't want a brewery. So we probably called like 20 properties. We don't want a brewery. So I started to expand out a little bit, because my thing was I didn't want to go down to something up this way. It's a lot of money. Figured that the cities would want it. The cities want it, but however, I couldn't find a landlord who wanted it. So that was kind of frustrating, not getting any real reasons why. So as we started to expand out a little further, we started getting calls. It's like, hey, we'll let a brewery here. And so we started talking to them. It's like, well, how much money do you have? It's like, well, we're trying to get some money together. Well, get some money and then come back. And we even had this like one just like one guy called us and was like, hey, I want to get a brewery up in this city called Plano, blah blah blah. We want to do this old church. We're gonna knock down all these buildings, apartments over here, townhomes over here, restaurants, blah blah blah. Here's the renderings of the building we want. The rent's like $25 a square foot. Oh yeah, the landlord's not gonna fix any of the building. It's like, okay, so you expect any brewery to come in here and spend like 12 grand a month in rent, and you're not going to help out with any of that cost. They were like, no. It's like, so just hearing those no's is kind of like, all right, you start to just build on what to say going forward. So even though you're taking a L here, you're still winning because you're basically learning what to do with the next steps going forward, what to say, what not to say. So we've got a lot of push here in Dallas. A lot of people want to see the brewery. It's just, as the other guys were saying, finding the landlord who wants it is like the key, because if they don't understand how a brewery works, I think that's the key, that a lot of them think a brewery is like a bar, that a lot of folks just gonna get drunk, start fighting. But a lot of them are more family friendly. You can bring your pets there. A lot of them close 9, 10 o'clock, and it's just like it's. But some of them just don't know how breweries work. That the brewery can be that center point to help grow that neighborhood. And so I think once they realize that, I think a lot more breweries will open. However, it's just trying to find the right spot and just pushing on. Not letting those no's get you down. That's been the biggest thing, is just like you hear no, and it's like, okay, well, let's move forward.
Bro, you got to also remember, man, the abbreviation for pub, or it's an abbreviation for public house. And we don't have any public houses in our communities, let alone the definition for it. So one of the things I would just a little 2 cents, like, y'all need to know your council members. Y'all need to know y'all city. Y'all need to sit in them damn meetings. While we were getting all them no's, homie, we were also up in the city. Like, every time we used to walk out the elevator, they'd be like, Crowns and Hops. I mean, it was like they knew who the fuck we were. So when it was time for everything to come together, bro, when I tell you, and knock on wood, shit is going smooth because they know who we are. They know our intent. They know our plans. Even though the location has changed 5 times, which eventually we'll have a Crowns and Hops documentary produced by Whetstone. But the reality is, the goal is to give breadcrumbs. So like to what Shannon, to what Kumba, and Raj are talking about, like, everybody shouldn't be starting from fucking square one every time, man. Like, that's why we're stuck at 1%. Because everybody is like either hoarding information or doesn't realize that information would be valuable in everybody's respective journey.
Dealing with a lot of these issues, that's the reason why we're starting the new incubation program. So we look at a lot of the things that are going on, dealing with a lot of what these gentlemen are saying, as far as trying to get brick and mortar locations, dealing with financials, and dealing with the extension of even just running a brewery in a sense, right? So even for myself, like getting in, like I've been fortunate on the financial front, right? So I literally looked at my business partner and was like, when are we opening the brewery? He's like, I've been waiting for you to ask me that. That's an anomaly. Like it just doesn't happen. But on the other end of the sense, like I recognize the struggles that everybody else has gone through. And I've been in a fortunate situation to be able to help out other people, especially with this new location opening in North Carolina. So dealing with that particular location, I mean, even outside of just offering the brewing ability for you to work on your own recipes, for you to be able to learn about the common brew house procedures and stuff like that, we're extending that program to work with other partnerships. They want to help out with marketing. They want to help out with brewery sustainability. So once you do open, how are you going to function your brewery, and how are you going to make sure that your brewery survives? Those are the most important things that we got to function with, especially as Black men, to make sure that our breweries are going to function. Even, once you open, that's cool and fine and dandy, but we want to be open 20 years from now. We want that sustainability. And so trying to create that front, dealing with this new North Carolina location, that was all such an important thing for me. And it was funny dealing with the conversation that I had, because it was with a white boy at that. A couple of them actually, when I launched Black is Beautiful, and they were like, man, dealing with this, are you ready to be one of the forefronts of Black brewers in the industry? And I kind of just laughed it off, because I mean, at the end of the day, I've been a Black man my whole life. Like, I don't have to project that I'm Black for people to recognize that I'm Black. Like, that's just who I am. And so I kind of laughed it off, like, but then I recognized that the sense with the second location, like, damn, he was right. Like, I had this ability to help my brothers and sisters in a whole separate situation outside of that. And so dealing with this incubation program, like, it's going to help people like Kumba, it's going to help people like Shannon, I mean, even T.O., he's not open by then. You come to the North Carolina location and start working on some recipes. And so, dealing with this particular thing of what a lot of people are saying as far as the experiences that they've had, hopefully the more of us open and build a brand and build sustainability, we'll be able to give back and help out other individuals and kind of grow from there.
And I had a comment because we're all talking about leasing and finding that landlord, and I think this will be helpful. We should also consider purchasing, buying and being our own landlords. And one of our buildings we own, one of them we lease. And when we first started out, we secured that building in like a dilapidated area, an area we wanted to bring up. And what we noticed is just us putting our concept into that building and purchasing it automatically increased the value of the building, right? Mm-hmm. So the bank, when they might have been a little bit timid about giving us a loan for the business and the business alone, like made a loan that it captured the equity in the building itself, right? But not only that, even the initial 9 investors that we got, when we were sharing shares of the initial shares, we included shares in the LLC that held the building and shares in the LLC that owned the brewery business. So a couple of effects, one, we're using equity that we created based on our own concepts, right? And 2, we're mitigating everybody's risk, right? Because you have a real estate asset. So both the bank and new investors, have a claim to that if anything goes wrong. But in the LLC for the brewery and the business, you're also reducing the amount of equity that they're taking from that chunk because you're spreading it then. So ownership, banks the SBA and private banks will lend on real estate all day. If you could somehow rope in some of the TI and improvements that you need from the brewery into that loan, you can kind of, I think there's value in that, and you can kind of jump ahead of the bank and say, I have this asset,
Hey, Steven, guess which one?
That's a lot of game, Arthur. That's a lot of game. I hey, that's a mouthful, man. I caught it all. I'm sure we all did, but that is all facts. That is a huge amount of game. We're almost done, but I just want to give William. I see you finally made it to your destination. Congratulations.
Yes, I did. It took forever.
This Atlanta traffic. See, this is my hometown, man. I really understand. Like the struggle is extremely real.
To Egypt.
Seriously, you got the pyramids in the background, like ready.
Civilization.
But before we wrap this thing up, and actually, I think Arthur, that segue that you provided is extremely potent, right? Because ultimately, at least for me, like these conversations have to come down to ownership. When we're talking about 1%, like said more plainly, we're talking about 1% of us who own this shit too, right? And so, as has been alluded to in the conversation today, Marcus, your incredible work and leadership and bringing us together, not just, for the occasion, but like in general with the fun, Black is Beautiful. Is there a possibility, or maybe I'm late to the game and y'all can fill me in, but what can we do right now where we are with the power? Because again, there's a lot of Black power on the call right now to talk about existing networks, resources. I'm thinking specifically about the incredible Fawn Weaver and this venture capital fund that she has just started in keeping with her legacy. What is out there? What are we doing? How can we support each other? And if it's not tangible right now, how can we at least create an opportunity to link offline and build each other up, in particular around these conversations that doesn't put us in a position of needing to negotiate with landlords, but possibly even coming up on our own spaces as well and locking in the value. I think that's so true. Like what's underestimated is that when we have a business that's inside of a commercial space, from day one, that is a huge value add, right? To protect it actually is a risk mitigation thing for us too, as entrepreneur. I'm saying us, like I have a brewery, but you know what I'm saying? Like what can we do, either that y'all already have underway, or what's next for us to link offline to try to build power and capacity? And I'm also noticing there's no Black women on the call. You know what I mean? So like, where are we at? What can we do? What's the next steps?
I'll jump it right into it. Again, that's why we created A-Trail Pills, was to talk about the fiscal and the business element of craft beer. Most people know us in terms of what we did last year and what we're going to continue to do. But the reality is these programs need to start laddering into all these other programs. For example, 8 Trills will have a direct portal to Marcus's incubator program. It'll have a direct portal to the Michael J. Jackson Foundation that Garrett Oliver created. It'll have a direct portal into Crafted for All by Dr. J. Beckham. The reality is we have to continue to make a robust ecosystem of directing capital and ensuring that people have the tools to compete. One of the main award grantees from our program, we were able to help buy a canning line. That canning line then gave them the ability to can anytime they wanted versus relying on the schedule of an outsourced, white-owned canner who maybe didn't make them a priority. We gave them control. And that's what this is about: control, equity, and laddering our resources together. Because the lie is they want you to think that the top is this big and there can only be one Black-owned brewery. Or that one of the interview questions that I had from, I think it was like Marketplace on NPR or something, they were like, why are you giving money to people that are ultimately your competitors? I'm like, bro, until we're like 20%, they're not my competitors. They're truly my allies. And unless they're winning, we're not winning. Because unless we're breaching that 1%, and I'll finish that on this point, we are not doing what we need to do as a collective to leverage the resources that we're creative in our respective regions. So A-Trail Pills for us.
100%. I mean, just to touch on what Tio said, it's about supporting your own. So for like myself, for instance, like I always make a point to like try to help out the homies. So, Shannon, Smitty, all that type of stuff. These people that I've known for the last few years that I've seen coming up for the longest time. So when Jessica hit me up about this situation, they were the first 2 people that I hit up just off the GP that, I know that they need the support. I know that they need the marketability, that type of thing. And so for me, it's all about always trying to support the homies, always trying to support our people, and always trying to build on that. Any given way that I can go ahead and give back to the people that look just like me, I'm 100% do. I mean, we're in such a caged box within this brewing community. I mean, especially like this weekend, for instance, I'm going to New York for this hype festival. I guarantee you I'm the only, out of 60 breweries, I'm the only Black-owned brewery that's going to be there. Like that shouldn't be the case. I mean, there should be more balance within what we're seeing and what we're doing. And so any way that I can try to help promote, try to help build and try to help the individuals that are gonna put us on the map, then I'm gonna try to continue to do that.
Yeah, I would say that pulling resources. I like that statement. And I think initially everybody thinks that's financial, but it's also knowledge, right? We're all gaining little. I think someone said breadcrumbs, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The first thing we could do is share knowledge. How to deal with chains. How to self-distribute. What your contract should look like. As a when you're signing with a distributor. So pulling all resources, but I think initially first, calls just like this, discussions just like this, where we're pulling our knowledge.
Yeah. I hope to continue this conversation at my spot next week, but I am late. I have to go. I'm so sorry. But thank you so much. And I really do want to continue, especially this last part of it, because yeah, I believe in that.
Appreciate you, Brother George.
And I'd add like one last component is, looking at the folks assembled here, and we know that network is bigger. It's having greater control of the narrative. And that's, Crowns and Hops is out there. We are a part of this game. So kind of like the comment to them is like, don't you worry, you're funding your competitor. Wait, white boys open a whole bunch of stuff right next door to each other. And no one goes like, oh, aren't you worried about your, we're not black brewers who are competing with each other just because we're black brewers. That's what's hitting us in Atlanta, is this sort of the notion of us because we're black, we're competing with the other black breweries. It's like, no, we're a brewer competing in a market with other brewers. We want our product to be superior and our experience at our places to be excellent, just like everybody else. And I think it was the craft CBP. I was talking with Andrew Copland, and I said, how come you never have us sit there and talk about what we know about the process of brewing? Why are we always the DEI conversation? I was like, we have folks who know how to make beer excellently. And we need to be in all those conversations so that we can wrestle that narrative of like, oh, I mean, we've lived through it over the years.
We have.
I mean, oh, you're the black sommelier. So what's it like to be the only one? Or there's another one here. Do you guys get along? That's
a true statement. That's definitely a true statement. I mean, just like last year,
yeah, it's wrestling that narrative. Marcus, through the great work he's done, all of us here have done some excellent things. And we will continue to do that, to say, we're not asking for a special place at the table. We can compete. We will do well, and we will succeed. And we're just, what we put out in the market is just as good as someone else. And the narrative that typically gets played is that, well, what about that other black brewery that's going to open? Atlanta's got like 3 or 4 lined up. We're like coming into the Atlanta airport. But we all talk, we all get along, we all support each other, we're all part of this thing together. It's getting that narrative and making sure we're a part of the big boy conversations, and we're at the grown folks table. And we don't let them put us over with the small plates.
Hey, real quick, just to shout out a couple of women in the industry. Annie Johnson, probably one of the most significant home brewing.
That's my auntie.
Oh my God, bro! Like, I mean, Celeste Beatty, Harlem Brewing Company, POW, Powell Brewing, out at here, also in LA, Inglewood, which stands for Power of a Woman. They're there, Stephen. They're there, and they've always been there.
I feel
you
that.
Figure we got Queza Brewing open up in Rwanda. That's the woman-led brewery. It's gonna be dope. But just like William was touching on, dealing with a lot of the DEI stuff, it's funny because me and Tio had a call, what was that, last year, dealing with Big Beer, wanting to talk to us about how they need to go ahead and filter through the DEI community and better their brand. But
no, they were so upset that they invited me to that shit. They were.
But on the other end of the spectrum, to be real with you guys, like say for instance, so you guys know I'm on the board of directors for the Brewers Association. So one of the things that I specifically did not want to do was the DEI committee, because especially after dealing with Black is Beautiful, just being a Black man that promotes Black craft beer anyway, I didn't want that to be something secondary that I was doing. But after sitting into a board meeting and listening to some of the things that these white folks were talking about, I realized that it was 100% important for me to be on the DEI committee. So just to touch on the other end of that, they, like we may not want that to be our focus, but dealing with a lot of the stuff these white folks do not understand. And, you know, we need to make sure that we're covering those different subjects to make sure that we're getting that proper representation and we're getting what we properly want within the industry. Because I've even had to sit in that meeting and say, I don't know how comfortable I feel with these 20 white folks making decisions on diversity. So that's just the other end of it.
That's the bar. I think we got to end there. But
Hey,
the work,
if I can say this really quick, Stephen,
yeah,
it takes a team. If we're in the room, the next time you're in that room, bring somebody with you. You know, so it takes a team to make the dream work, right? But yeah, we're 1% right now. I guarantee you in the next 5 years, it's going to jump up. We're going to put the work in. I know you guys are going to put the work in. Stephen and Jessica, Marcus, thank you guys for putting this panel together. We need to share more dialogue.
I'm with it. I so much appreciate y'all. This is just the beginning, and we'll do it again. Thank you for linking us. Jessica, thank you for all the work you do. I appreciate all of y'all. Whetstone Magazine, Whetstone Media is here on everyone's behalf. Y'all can get at me. Y'all can get at our company. If we can ever do anything to amplify on our end, we're with it too. So appreciate the time and the work.